An excerpt from Chapter 7 from God's Great Tradition of Global Wisdom. Philosophia Perennius, the Perennial Philosophy. Perhaps one of the most fortuitous discoveries brought forth in the 20th century by academics or modern scholarship based in archaeology, history, and comparative religions is the affirmation that there is indeed a perennial philosophy or universal teaching of wisdom that cuts across all cultural boundaries, regardless of the century or country we've been born into. I believe this discovery may end up being even more important than many of the discoveries of modern science and the incredible inventions of technology. This is because its wisdom gives us an opportunity to heal the ills of the modern world, corrupted by the destructive power of scientific materialism, unchecked capitalism, and corrupt communism, as well as nationalism and various forms of cultism. The notion of a perennial or reoccurring philosophy suggests the existence of a universal set of human truths and values, an idea postmodern philosophers view with skepticism, suspicion, and doubt. Yet, this does not diminish its vital importance for the future of the human race. Today, scholar practitioners are emphasizing that the perennial philosophy is not as uniform as some may profess, because there is a spectrum of religious and mystical development, from psychic to subtle to causal to non-dual states, not one homogeneous soup of soul and spirit everyone agrees on. In other words, not all paths make it to the same mountaintop. Yet, when this diverse variation is taken into account and seen from a large enough or evolved enough perspective, there are certain universal themes or deep structures running throughout all religious mystical experiences that warrant them being identified as perennial or ever-repeating, occurring year after year, century after century, culture after culture, mind after mind. In essence, spiritually oriented people discover they are all talking about the same thing when considering what is God, or truth, or ultimate reality, and what is life really about. By the mid-20th century, the novelist Aldous Huxley, famed British author of Brave New World, published a book titled The Perennial Philosophy as World War II was ending. This best-selling academic book was Huxley's attempt to thwart any future worldwide conflicts by showing us the common unity of human wisdom and its shared perennial philosophy. Huxley pointed out in his introduction, quote, "Rudiments of the perennial philosophy may be found among the traditional lore of primitive peoples in every region of the world, and in its fully developed forms, it has a place in every one of the higher religions," unquote. From the most primordial to the most exalted, there is a universal cross-cultural spirituality running through all of us. After publishing his book in 1945 with its now famous title, Huxley made the articulation and dissemination of the perennial philosophy one of his primary tasks for the rest of his life. He delighted in showing us the similarities between the wisdom teachings of the ancients and our current modern adepts, as well as emphasizing the necessity for spiritual practice and meditation. As Huxley taught, quote, "It is only in the act of contemplation, when the words and even personality are transcended, that the pure state of the perennial philosophy can actually be known." Huxley often listed four fundamental doctrines, what he called, quote, "the perennial philosophy in its minimal and basic form," unquote, giving us a minimum working hypothesis of the highest common factor in all the world's religions, which were quickly followed by a fifth tenet that highlights Guru Yoga, a list which I will paraphrase by using some quotes from Huxley. These are the fundamental doctrines of the perennial philosophy. 1. There are two truths of one non-dual reality, which are 1. Relative reality as immanent spirit, creating, quote, "the phenomenal world of matter and individualized consciousness, the world of things and animals and men and even gods or subtle beings," unquote, also known as the many or the creation. And 2, an absolute reality or the transcendent unconditional reality or the divine ground that is consciousness itself, also called Brahman, Tao, Allah, Godhead, etc., known as the One or Creator, and the source and condition from which all conditional and relative realities, including all possible universes and states of consciousness, arise, exist, and fall away. Number 2, human beings have a dual nature, including the phenomenal self, which is the ego I, or the self-contracting activity of the separate self-sense, active in the conditional world of forms, which also includes the soul, Atman with a small a, or the subtle inner entity that reincarnates or survives bodily death. And B, the true self, Atman with a capital A, is, quote, "the spark of divinity within the soul," unquote, that even transcends the sense of being within. It is possible, via spiritual practice and meditation, to identify with this eternal true self and to reawaken, quote, "with the divine ground," unquote, of absolute reality, and thus realize real God or divine enlightenment. Number 3, enlightenment is possible. Human beings are not only able to know about this divine ground and true self or absolute reality by inference or mental logic, but they can, quote, "also realize its existence by direct intuition, superior to discursive reasoning," unquote, in the scientific method. This awakened awareness is called enlightenment and God realization, traditionally known as gnosis, prajna, satori, wu, moksha, rigpa, samyok sambodhi, etc., an awareness that is innate in everybody and is the pinnacle of human development. Number 4, the goal of life is to know God. Tat tavam asi, thou art that. The sole purpose of human life is to, quote, "identify with the eternal true self, and so come to unitive knowledge of the divine ground," unquote, and to be transformed by this enlightened state, as all the great sages and guru adepts demonstrate in person. To reach or realize this goal or condition, it is necessary to practice yoga and regular meditation, best served by cultivating a sacred relationship with an authentic guru adept, in order to fulfill and live this God-realized process in person, the essence of real religion. And number 5, Guru Yoga is real religion. Huxley wisely emphasized that there are, quote, human incarnations of the divine ground, by whose mediation and grace the worshipper is helped to achieve his or her goal, the ultimate knowledge of the Godhead, which is a person's eternal life and beatitude, unquote. Satsang, or Guru Yoga, is the method of living in an active and sacred relationship with a true Siddha Guru, or adept realizer, that has been practiced for millennia and is the essence of real religion and the perennial philosophy. Huxley goes on to mention the vital importance of ethical corollaries supporting the perennial philosophies. These constitute the moral life of anybody wanting to learn about and practice authentic spiritual life in their attending disciplines. This approach emphasizes right life in Adi Da's and the Buddha's terms, often founded on different degrees of renunciation or self-transcending discipline, grounded in self-control, non-attachment, and ego transcendence, based in the practice of love, compassion, and wisdom. Such a profound depth of understanding, hidden in the world's religious traditions, becomes the necessity for the practice of Guru Yoga and in honoring our enlightened adepts. All of the genuine mystics of the world have perennially suggested the only way to peace, both individually and collectively, is via God realization and the practice of love. Ken Wilber insightfully summarizes, quote, "The aim of the mystics is to deliver men and women from their battles by delivering them from their boundaries, not manipulate the subject and not manipulate the object, but transcend both in non-dual consciousness. The discovery of the ultimate whole is the only cure for unfreedom, and it is the only prescription offered by the mystics," unquote. This truth is simple. All people want freedom because everyone has the urge to reach toward an infinite light beyond the confines of mortality, even when the outer world is full of death, destruction, and suffering. A reoccurring innate instinct in our hearts compels us to fulfill this hidden truth. Because of this, we have the perennial philosophy and the wisdom of true gurus to guide us on the way to real freedom and liberation. But we must first turn to them, access the great tradition of perennial wisdom, or else we are headed to further disasters and nothing but more suffering and endless brutal wars. The choice is ours.